Marcy, Skylight, Gray, Cliff, and Redfield done. Now the long walk back to the lodge. 3:55 a.m., just signed in. Santanoni Range, let's go. The wind is whipping here in the Seward Range today. Just finished the Macomb slide and my legs are on fire. Well, I fell victim to the floating logs again. Made it to the top of East Dix. Peak number 3 of 5 for today here in the Dix Range. Avalanche Pass. On top of Rocky Peak Ridge. It's like a hurricane up here. Rain and wind here on Tabletop. Whiteface, number 6. Muddy day here on Street and Nye for number 7 and 8. Sunny and blue on Haystack. Algonquin, up in the clouds, number 18. Gothics, number 22. Panther, number 38. Allen, number 45. 7:12 a.m. Big Slide, Adirondack, 46er. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast. August 17th, 2018. I had no plans of hiking this weekend, though around 3 p.m. on Friday afternoon I started texting with my friend Eli, who I met twice randomly on the trail. Eli was texting me saying he was thinking of hiking the Seward Range tomorrow. And knowing I still had to hike that range and that hiking with someone as opposed to solo would be amazing, I thought about it for a minute and then I said, you know what? I'll join you. Well, looks like I'm hiking this weekend after all. So after wrapping my almost 15-hour workday on Friday in Brooklyn, New York, I got in my car as I always do and I started driving north to the Adirondacks. I often sleep in my van on Friday nights at a rest stop on I-87 as I drive back home after the work week, but since I didn't get out of work and on the road until around 8:30 p.m., in order to make it to the trailhead to start hiking around 5:30 a.m., there was very little wiggle room hours-wise. So I had to make it to the trailhead. Fortunately, all of my hiking gear was still in my vehicle because the weekend before I hiked the Santanonis and immediately left from the trailhead for New York, so I had everything I needed right in my car, except food. So I stopped at exit 15 on the Northway in Saratoga Springs to stock up on food for the day at the mobile gas station. I wasn't able to bring my usual peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, so I had to improvise, gas station style. Hard-boiled eggs, beef jerky, and Snickers bars were on the menu for tomorrow's hike. Not the best, but you gotta do what you gotta do. And 2 gallons of water, which I transferred to my bladder and my water bottles. I continued the drive, and I had a great vibe that night because I knew adventure awaited and that I had no choice but to make it all the way to the trailhead, despite being up for close to 24 hours already. Another funny thing about this drive is I actually passed my house in Saranac Lake as I drove to the Corey's Road trailhead. I figured it would be better to sleep in my van at the trailhead instead of scaring my wife by coming in the house, since I told her I was going straight to the trailhead. But I finally made it to the trailhead, and I'll say driving down the dirt road, the 6 or 7 miles or whatever it is at 2 o'clock in the morning down Corey's Road definitely has a bit of an eerie vibe to it. It's very remote out there. But I made it to the trailhead at 2:30 a.m., and since Eli wasn't meeting me until 5:30 a.m., I quickly passed out in the back for a few hours. And man, once I turned my van lights off, it was dark out there. 5:15 a.m. came and my alarm went off and my nap was over. Time to get ready to do some hiking. I ate some of my gas station food and filled up my water bottles and bladder as a car pulled into the trailhead. It was Eli, right on schedule. So we said our hellos and we signed in at 5:50 a.m. A very late sign-in for me, but due to the circumstances, I was okay with it. The Seward Range was up, and it was time to hit the trail. Our plan for the day was to start on the Blueberry Trail and take the Calkins Brook Trail up to Donaldson, then over to Emmons via the Seward Range Trail, back to Donaldson, over to Seward, and then down to the Ward Brook Trail, where Eli and I would then go our separate ways since he hiked Seymour the previous week. I would continue hiking and take a right and walk further down the Ward Brook Truck Trail to the Seymour Trail, all the way up and all the way back down Seymour, and then hike the roughly 5 miles Flat Woods Trail out to the trailhead. A roughly 22-mile day hike with more than 5,500 feet of elevation gain here in the Seward Range was underway. It was a big day. Fortunately, we had another sunny day, so that really helped. The first few miles of the trail is flat and a great way to begin the morning. Nothing strenuous and some very wide trails at times. I was pretty into it. Since we were hitting Donaldson first, we went onto the Calkins Brook Trail, and after winding through the woods for a few miles, it was time to start climbing. The trail runs along the Calkins Brook, obviously, and the brook runs along the vast majority of the trail. Once you get above the water, you're very close to the top. Before we began climbing, I ate one of the gas station breakfast sandwiches I purchased. It wasn't great, but desperate times called for desperate measures, am I right? I had a feeling that whether I had enough fuel was going to be the big challenge today, and it certainly played a role in everything. We started climbing up Donaldson. For being herd path trails, I will say I found the trails in the Seward Range to be some of the best herd path trails, if not the best, of any of the high peaks. They felt like maintained trails just without trail markers. Not too worn, decent on the feet, not slipping on roots everywhere. It was actually quite pleasant. And after we got to the top of the brook, we were almost at the top, and soon we came out on the lookout summit of Donaldson at 8:45 a.m., just under 3 hours from signing in. 4,140 feet elevation for high peak number 41. This was the best summit of the day, in my opinion, and has a sign and great lookout views over the Seward Range. It reminded me of the summits on most of the Dix Range, that type of feel. Once up here, I ate my typical peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Just kidding. I didn't have one today, so I ate half of my king-size Snickers bar instead. Hungry? Why wait? Grab a Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. The sun was shining and blue sky with minimal clouds for the day. Excellent temperatures, exactly what you'd want. We stayed for maybe 10 minutes, and then we began our out-and-back trip along the Seward Range Trail over to Emmons. As far as going along the ridge from one high peak to another, the almost 1 mile trip from Donaldson to Emmons might be the easiest. Not a whole lot of elevation loss or gain between the two mountains, not too strenuous physically. A nice herd path trail in the woods. A pleasant hike that seemed to be much quicker coming back than getting to it. But doesn't that always seem to be the case? We carried on and made it over to the wooded summit of Emmons in about 45 minutes from leaving Donaldson for high peak number 42. Emmons is the furthest west high peak and sits 4,040 feet and ranks at number 40 of the 46 elevation-wise. The 40th highest with an elevation of 4,040. 40-40. Nice. There's a high peaks trivia question for you. The summit is wooded with some views over the trees, if you're tall enough, like many other mountains, so it's not the most spectacular summit to hang out on for that long. Once we got to Emmons, I ate the other half of my king-size Snickers bar, and Eli wanted to stay on the summit for a while and relax a bit. So I obliged him, and we hung out for a bit, and eventually he could tell I was pretty antsy to get moving, since we had been up there for probably 20 minutes or so, which in my eyes was a very long stay for me. So we left Emmons and headed back to Donaldson, which felt like we made it back in half the time it took us to get to Emmons, and we blew over the Donaldson summit and towards Seward. It's only 0.7 miles from Donaldson to Seward, which we made excellent time on. The elevation loss and gain between these two mountains, again, is not too bad, and it goes relatively quickly. More herd path trails, but nice herd path trails in my opinion. And we made it over to Seward 90 minutes after leaving Emmons at 11:30 a.m. 4,361 feet elevation, the tallest mountain of the day for high peak number 43. A very wooded summit with zero views as it's completely surrounded by trees. It has some lookouts on the way up, but the summit has zero. Eventually a family landed on the summit while we were there, a mother, father, and 2 teenage sons who were all closing in on being 46ers themselves, which was quite cool to watch. A family who hikes together. Amazing. And Eli, who keeps these in his backpack, gave them an aspiring Adirondack 46er sticker as they left towards Donaldson. At this point, since Eli and I were going to split after Seward anyways, I decided to quickly leave since he wanted to hang out for a little while, so we went our separate ways. We said goodbye and I started the trek down Seward, which was definitely a challenge. The first half of the trip down Seward is all rock slabs, grabbing onto roots, climbing, praying to God that your feet don't slip and the traction holds. Since it had rained a day or two prior, the trail was very slippery. I passed a number of hikers during this portion of the day. After I finished the steep slabs portion, the bottom half of the trail is typical Adirondack herd path. Dirt trail with some rocks and a lot of exposed roots, but again, not as bad as many trails. I started cruising once I got here because the slab climbing was slow going. Then out of nowhere, I hear someone flying down the trail behind me. It was Eli. He caught up to me despite me leaving the summit probably 10 or 15 minutes before he did. Crazy. He's clearly a very fast hiker on the descent, and I'm a slow hiker. So he caught back up and we chatted while we finished the trail together, which was probably a better way to finish. Towards the bottom, there's some large mud pits that required some careful navigating, and it gave me flashbacks to my hellish time at the beginning of Cliff, my least favorite high peak of them all. Damn you, Cliff. But we made it down and came to the Ward Brook Truck Trail. We were officially off of Seward. At this point, Eli went left, back towards the trailhead, and I went right, further into the forest on the Ward Brook Truck Trail the half-mile over to Seymour. The trail towards Seymour is just an open woods trail, very wide and well-packed, and a little wooden bridge of sorts at one point. I was actually feeling pretty good on the day considering how long this hike is and the little food I had, but I ate a bag of peanut M&Ms and I walked over to Seymour. Then I came to the cairn marking the beginning of the Seymour herd path. Time to go up and come right back down. Eli told me this trail is a lot like Seward with all the rock slabs, so I wasn't looking forward to that due to my semi-fatigued state, but I started it out with a bang. Moving quickly through the trail, through some mud pit sections, some rock hopping sections. I was moving well and was actually quite pleased that I was eating up mileage on the way up without being at the slabs yet, because Eli made it sound like the whole trail is one big slab climb, which thankfully wasn't quite the case, but after many more stops to catch my breath than usual, because I was actually really tired, I came to the beginning of the slabs. I was definitely getting very tired very quickly. I didn't have the right amount of food today for performance and it was showing. But I ate some more beef jerky and started climbing the slabs, grabbing roots along the side and climbing up the best way possible. Up until this point, the trail was a constant elevation gain with seemingly no flat sections or leveling off to catch your breath, just up, and more up at a constant rate. So I was tired, and I ended up stopping way more than I should have. And the rock slabs didn't help, but I eventually made it to a more level section and said, this looks very peaky right now, which is something Josh and I say to each other often when we think we're at the top. I was positive I was at the summit and was so glad to be there because my body was tired. And then I realized, nope, this is not the summit. Because what I see far in the distance, that's the summit. I got pump faked once again very hard by this false summit. It was a real emotional blow this late into the day. So instead, I just sucked it up and carried on up the trail as fatigue and a few choice words went through my brain. And I soon made it to the actual summit. I saw that beautiful wooden summit sign, Seymour Mountain. The 1.5-mile trip up this steep and relentless trail was complete. It was 3 o'clock when I summited, and if you recall, I summited Seward at 11:30. So this one mountain took a good amount of time at this point in the day. But it's all there, all 4,120 feet of it, for high peak number 44 of 46. I'm so close now I can feel it. The summit is pretty decent with very nice views. It's pretty wooded, but there's still plenty of views to be had up there. Knowing I had the 1.5-mile trip down, followed by the 5-mile walk back to the car, and since I wanted to get home to spend some time with my wife and daughter this weekend, I didn't stay too long, just about 5 minutes or so, just enough to be up there for a minute. The trip down wasn't too eventful. It was slow going down the slabs. Then once off the slabs, I was able to pick up my pace and make much better time. And just before I got to the mud pit towards the bottom, I passed a group of hikers that we passed earlier in the day who were just starting Seymour. It was such a nice feeling seeing them just starting and me knowing I already did it and I was done. Kind of like when your wife's alarm clock goes off for work and you still get to sleep for a couple hours, but she has to wake up. It's a great feeling. Soon I came out to the cairn at the Ward Brook Trail. I banged a Louie and was beginning my 5.5-mile trip back to the trailhead to my car. The flat 5-mile trip back to the car seemed great when it began because I knew I had accomplished all 4 mountains of the Sewards in one day. A hike many people told me needs to be broken into 2 days. I know people often do this whole range in one day, and it was a good feeling being one of those people. The trip back passes the Ward Brook lean-to and a number of other lean-tos and camping spots, so this would actually be a really good choice for a camping trip. But since I had done all of my hikes so far as day hikes, I really wanted to finish all 46 as day hikes. Plus, I just never really have the time for an overnight. Around 2 miles into the walk back, I started jogging here and there to eat up mileage more, but that just made me even more tired, so I stopped doing that and started walking as fast as I could. I had one earbud in and was listening to music during this part of the day, which helped pass the time tremendously. After pumping some water at a brook into my bladder, I eventually finished and made it to the trailhead and signed out at 6:10 p.m., totaling my 22-mile, 5,500 feet of elevation gain, 4-peak day at 12 hours and 20 minutes, car to car. This monster of a day was in the books, and there were only 2 mountains left to become a 46er. Another successful day in the woods here in the Seward Range. Donaldson, Emmons, Seward, and Seymour in one day for high peaks numbers 41, 42, 43, and 44 on my 14th hike. All that's left is Allen and Big Slide here on my quest to summit all 46 high peaks of the Adirondacks in one summer. My next hike on Allen will also have me